I'm Jess Thompson. I am 28 years old at the moment, and I was diagnosed with stage 4 bowel cancer when I was 26 years old. I live in Auckland, New Zealand, and at the moment, am really into running. At the time of diagnosis, I didn't have a lot of family support around me, so um, my dad's not a massive support of mine in my life, and my mum passed away when I was 15. So it was quite a difficult journey, I would say, going through that without that support around me. I think it was probably about 4 months before my diagnosis, I was having really bad stomach cramp, like episodes of stomach cramps coming on really strongly. And it was like, it was almost as if I was like, at the time, I sort of thought maybe I was gluten intolerant or something like that. It was just really sharp, stabbing cramps that were very debilitating. And they would come on like out of nowhere and then would result in me having a lot of diarrhea or vomiting or both. And then it would be fine about like 48 hours later. So it was really random the way that it would like come on very quickly, be very excruciating, and then kind of go away quite quickly. So I had 3 or 4 episodes like that. I did go to the emergency doctors here in New Zealand straight away the first time, because the first time actually lasted, I would say, probably 2 to 3 days. What they told me, I had like a gastro bug, so I went to the doctors, and then I sort of thought maybe I'd had like an ice cream, and I thought maybe it had like melted and then refrozen and I had like food poisoning or something. But they gave me some pills to take and they did nothing. So I went back again 48 hours later, and they just said to take some more of the pills and it would be fine. I think, honestly, the pain, like when I was going through it, like I just I couldn't physically like continue to experience what I was experiencing. Like it was just too much. And so I think that's really what drove me. I'm not gonna lie, I before this was probably the type of person that wouldn't have necessarily looked into something if it was not affecting me massively, like I probably would have brushed off something if it wasn't so debilitating. So I am really actually kind of glad that my symptoms were what they were, because I could have, something I didn't mention is that during that period, before diagnosis, I was having issues walking up hills, which is so random, but I couldn't get up. We've got this like famous like mountain here in New Zealand, and I went on holiday and I was like trying to climb up this mountain, which I've been up many times before, and I physically couldn't do it. I felt like I couldn't breathe, and I just assumed that I was like super unfit because I hadn't been working out for quite a while. And I walked back down the mountain, I went home, and I slept for 4 hours, and I just didn't even think anything of that. But now knowing what I know, that was because I was so anemic. Like I actually, my muscles weren't getting like the blood that they needed to function. But if that was my only symptom, I may have carried on for a while. Like I might not have even clicked. I was pushing for blood tests as well because I felt like something wasn't right. Like I just felt um, like why would this be happening like every month? I thought maybe I could have like it could be like endometriosis or something. It was really strange that it was like every month that it was happening. So I was pushing for blood tests, and I was actually about to go and get blood tests with my doctor, but then I had another episode of the stomach cramps, and this time was like particularly bad. So I called an ambulance. Actually, I was living by myself, so I just was worried I was going to pass out from the pain that I was in. So I called an ambulance and then was rushed to hospital, and they did a blood test there, and I was severely anemic. I needed 3 blood transfusions and an iron transfusion immediately. So that's when the process kind of all began of learning what was going on. I was very frustrated, especially considering I think once I got my diagnosis, it was something that I had to like really work through, because it wasn't like people would say to me, "Oh, well, lucky they found it," And I'm like, I'm stage 4. Like, this is already, like, who knows what would have, like, how different it could have been for me had they picked that up 3 months earlier, you know? Um, so it is definitely really frustrating. It's something that I now am like a really big advocate here in New Zealand. It felt like it was a long process, but I think it probably took um, like 2 or 3 days. It was like kind of like the first scan was an ultrasound, I think, and then I was sent for a CT scan, and then I was told that they saw something in the CT scan, but even at that time, they were really reluctant to comment on what that could be. And they actually even told me that the imaging could be wrong, like maybe it was nothing. And so that was the first little inkling I had. That was probably about like 3 days into me being at hospital. And then um, the next day, I had a different doctor come in and say, so the previous doctor mentioned it could be cancer, right? And I said, no, not really. No, she didn't. She said it, like, she kind of said it could be, but she said it in a very, like, passing, like, chances are very slim, like, maybe it's absolutely nothing. We need to get a better look at this thing, kind of thing. And then the next doctor said, you've been told it could be cancer. And that was the first time that I was given the kind of like it could be. But they said that I needed to have a colonoscopy to really confirm what it was. But I had already kind of started grappling with the idea then that it could be quite bad. And I'd never had any experience with cancer before. I really didn't understand what that meant. Like, I remember immediately feeling like my body was just failing. Like, I had no idea what that meant or that it was something that could be removed or like worked on. Like, I just had no one in my family has been through that. So I was like, that's it. Like, my body's shutting down, you know, like you kind of don't know what, yeah, you don't, it's, yeah, until you're told more information, it's a lot to process for sure. So that was the first time. And then I had a colonoscopy. I think it was, I had to go home for a little while. It might have been like 3 or 4 days. And then I was put back in hospital for the colonoscopy. And um, it, yeah, it was during the colonoscopy that they told me before the colonoscopy that they would be like talking to me during the procedure and explaining like what they saw and things like that. And there was a screen in front of me, so I was fully awake. I had no sedatives or anything, which is something that I don't think people know here in New Zealand. And through the public system, you don't get sedated, so you are fully aware of what is happening. And so during the colonoscopy, I could see on the screen in front of me, they kind of like injected something with something, and I didn't know what that was, but I knew that something was wrong. And everyone, like, there was just an energy in the room that was like not a good energy, and I just started crying because I just knew that something wasn't right. And the nurse started kind of like comforting me, like rubbing my arm, and I just knew, I was like, something is so wrong here. And then I was by myself, like they didn't let me have a support person in the waiting room with me for this. So I was in the waiting room, like no one would look at me. Like, all the nurses and doctors walking past wouldn't look me in the eyes because I think they knew information. They weren't allowed to share that with me at that time because it probably needed to go to my doctor to then complete the report and like come and tell me the information. So it was quite traumatic, to say the least. So he said, he came in and saw me, and he said that there was a tumor in my colon, and that it was a decent sized tumor, and that it was partially blocking my intestine, and that was what was causing all of the issues that I was having, was that my food was actually not getting through. So I would have been constipated, but I didn't realize, because I was still going to the bathroom, but maybe my bowel motions were like pellet-like or not like a fully formed bowel motion. So that was what was causing the cramps and the episodes of diarrhea and vomiting. So the first thing that they said was we need to get it out, like regardless of what it is, it's causing an obstruction in your bowel. And then the next thing they said is um, we don't know if it's cancer yet. We've got to wait for the biopsy results to confirm that it's cancer. Those are going to take 2 weeks to get. So we've got to wait for that, and we need you to have surgery. So I needed to have surgery before I had even confirmed that it was cancer. And I remember asking him, "What are the chances it's not cancer?" And he said, "Slim to none," because of the size of the tumor. Um, the chances of it being cancerous were just so like it was just yeah. And I kind of learnt through that depending on the size of a tumor is kind of how they can gauge the chances of it being cancerous or not. So at that point, I was just really sick of not being given the full information on what was happening. So I had a hemicolectomy. So I've had my right side, half my colon on my right side removed, and that actually went really well. The surgery went really well for me. He took much longer than he should have during his surgery. Unfortunately for my partner and friends, they had no information and were freaking out that I had died. But it's not funny. Sorry, I shouldn't laugh. But the surgery was supposed to be 5 hours, and he took 9 hours because when I went into the theatre room, I just started bawling my eyes out because there was a chance he was going to have to do open surgery, which was going to take a lot longer for me to recover from because I hadn't handled the bowel prep well. My bowel prep actually got stuck because of the tumor. So I was throwing it up. So there was a lot of like fluid in there, which was really dangerous with surgery as well. So I had to have a nasal gastro tube, which is like honestly probably the worst thing of this whole process I've ever experienced. I had to have two of them throughout the journey that I went on. So I had to have one of them to kind of get all the liquid out of my body, and then had the surgery. The surgery went really well. He managed to do like partial keyhole, I would say. The keyhole is a bit bigger than what a normal keyhole would be because my bowel was distended, so it was like quite full of stuff. He needed like a bigger space to get that out. And then I remember being like partially awake and him telling me how things went. And he told me that they found a lump outside of the colon in the fat tissue. And he said it could be nothing, could be something random, but we've sent it away to be tested because there was like a lump in your fat tissue in the front of your stomach, like not in the colon. And they sent away 36 lymph nodes to be tested as well. And then, yeah, it was a waiting game. It was another 2 weeks from there for those results to come back to know the staging and what the next steps were for me. And then got the call that it had spread. It was in 3 of my lymph nodes, and the lump in my fat tissue was cancerous as well. So they considered that stage 4. I think maybe it would be 3B overseas, but they don't do that kind of staging here. It's just kind of either 3 or 4. And then he explained to me that I would have to do chemo, but it was that he'd gotten everything out, so it was going to be fine. And I wasn't going to lose my hair, and it wasn't like what you see on the TV, and that it was like all going to be fine. And so from there, I was kind of like upset but optimistic about the outcome. And then I went and saw my oncologist nurse, and she broke the news to me that I had the BRAF genetic mutation, which is resistant to chemotherapy. So that was like a roller coaster ride in itself of the fact that my surgeon had told me that everything would be fine, and now my oncologist nurse was saying that in fact it may not actually even work. So yeah, it was a bit of a real kind of blindside, and probably just missed comms there on their end around that information. So They wouldn't give me much information until I hadn't had a PET scan yet post my surgery. So they wanted to do a PET scan to check how the cancer had spread elsewhere. And I was asking a lot of questions like, what are the chances of it working? What's the likelihood of it returning if I've got this mutation, this genetic mutation? And they were going to put me forward for a trial drug if the cancer had spread, which they were very adamant it would have spread, considering it was in my lymph nodes and had already metastasized. So it was a waiting game. They wouldn't answer any of my questions until we had that PET scan result. And I had to wait another week for the PET scan, and then I think another like 4 days for the results. So we went for the PET scan. I went for the PET scan and then got the results back, and somehow there was no cancer in my body on that scan. So it was just an absolute miracle, I would say, that was the case. I really genuinely don't even know how that happened. But it completely changed the trajectory for me. From there, I didn't have to do the trial drug, and I did chemotherapy, but I was already technically cancer free somehow by some, yeah, I would say a miracle. And so I completed 6 months of chemotherapy, and then I, yeah, had no evidence of disease in November of 2022, and I'm in remission now, and I've been in remission for coming up 2 years now. So at the beginning, my first round, so I think it was, I can't remember off the top of my head actually, but I'm sure it was like 9 rounds in total. I think they took a couple off. But the first round was really good. I was surprised by how my body had handled it. I had a lot of energy from the dexamethasone, and I was kind of running around the house crazy trying to clean everything, which I'm sure is relatable to anyone else that's first ever taken dexamethasone. And then my second round, so I kind of was like, okay, like this isn't so bad. And they told me I wouldn't be able to eat ice cream. I was still eating ice cream. I was like, I'm not going to stop eating ice cream. So at the beginning, it was fine. And then my second round, the fatigue really hit me. And I had left all these things to do because I was so full of energy the first time. And I really screwed myself over doing that because I couldn't do anything. I was so tired. I just felt very fatigued. I was really, really lucky. I had no nausea my entire treatment. So I didn't throw up once. All the throwing up was pre-surgery. So yeah, I had no nausea. The fatigue was there, but it was also, yeah, I just wasn't really pushing myself too hard with anything. Like I wasn't going to work anymore. I just gave myself a good break to really like process what was happening. And I think mentally, due to the situation of now this treatment being almost like precautionary, I was in quite a good space throughout my treatment. I didn't feel, although even in saying that, before I got that news, I had somehow come to terms with what was happening, and I had already kind of decided, even if I had 2 years, 3 years, like they were going to be great years. Like I don't know how to explain that, but I'm sure that a lot of people kind of get to that point where you've just kind of decided that if you've only got that time that you're going to make it good. And I had already kind of decided that before. And then I think getting the news that it will hopefully be much longer than that, I was just in like a really positive mindset throughout my treatment, which was really lucky. But yeah, side effects wise, the fatigue was definitely there. Towards the end of my treatment, I did get quite bad neuropathy, and it came on in a way that I know they talked about it a lot at the beginning, and I was looking out for it, like I was mindful of it, but I just wasn't aware of how it would throw off my like spatial awareness in terms of like walking around or like just like grabbing things or wearing shoes, like just the most random things. So when it first started coming on, I think I kind of missed it. I thought I was just going through, like, I thought I was just being clumsy. Like, I was tripping over more and just kind of like, yeah, it's hard to explain. I actually had a break from chemo and I went to Bali on a holiday. And that was when the neuropathy had started. And I was so clumsy in Bali, and it's so dangerous to be clumsy in Bali. And I just kept tripping up, and I was bruising really badly because of my white blood cell count, which I just didn't even realize. I just didn't even like think about that. So I was tripping over and then bruising like a peach. And but overall, I was quite lucky with the side effects. I think I would have like a week when I had my infusion in the hospital where I would kind of hermit away and stay inside because I was sensitive to the cold, more sensitive to the cold. Breathing in cold air did start to get very like harsh on my throat. And then also, yeah, drinking anything cold was just, it just didn't feel, started to feel not nice, I would say, and just like gross. But overall, I was quite lucky. I went and had reflexology, which helped a lot with the neuropathy, actually. And it went away very quickly after my treatment, thanks to the reflexology that I was getting. So I would highly recommend that for anybody that's going through it. One of the hardest things I went through during the treatment was that I just wasn't the same person anymore. And I also like find now like my tolerance for people is less. Like I really am, yeah, I don't have the same people pleasing tendencies that I had before. I don't have time for people in my life that aren't like genuine and aren't actually there to support me. And I think going through an experience like that really shows you who those people are and who the real ones are. But yeah, I would say I grieved the like my old self like massively. So, and that's not to say that the new me wasn't good, because if anything, I think the new me is even better than the old me. But it's just recognizing the change and like coming to terms with it, and also the fact that like you never asked for it and it was forced on you, and maybe you weren't ready for being faced with all of the challenges that the new you has to face. You know, it's massive. It's a massive thing to go through. I would say that you're capable of more than what you realize. I think even though things can be super scary and feel impossible to get through, a year from now can look so different. And I just kind of, yeah, I try to remind people that a year is, it feels really long, but it's actually not that long. And in the grand scheme of your life, something like this, it can be a bump in the road, and it can be something that happened, but something that you move on from. And there's always a chance of being able to look forward again and getting back to who you were. Well, not so much who you were, but getting back to where you were in your life, and like potentially even, you know, with a new perspective on things. Like that's what I found for myself is I've now like, I'm so grateful for my body in a new way that I don't think I would have ever had that before, and probably until I like had kids or something, you know. But it's now means that I get to live my life with a perspective that like people search for, you know, and it's actually like a gift in a way, what I've been given out of this experience.